In December 2025, Toronto Police announced a breakthrough that linked 3 historic homicides spanning from 1982 to 1997. Christine Prince, age 25, was sexually assaulted and killed in June 1982. Her body was discovered in the Rouge River area. Claire Samson, a young woman, was killed in 1983. Gracelyn Greenidge, also Barbados-born and living in Toronto, was sexually assaulted and killed in 1997. For more than 4 decades in some cases, these deaths were treated as unconnected. Then, through DNA matching and genetic genealogy, investigators identified the same perpetrator responsible for all 3, Kenneth Smith. Smith had died in 2019. He had been incarcerated for violent crimes from 1983 to 1999, yet the murders occurred before, during, and after that period. Police described the killings as crimes of opportunity. There were no obvious links between the victims beforehand. Investigators have noted the possibility of additional victims. The announcement came jointly from the Toronto Police Service and the Ontario Provincial Police on December 11, 2025. This is the story of 3 women, Christine Prince, Claire Samson, and Gracelyn Greenidge, whose lives were cut short. One invisible killer who evaded detection for decades, and the DNA revolution that brought truth after 28 to 43 years. But first, who were these women whose lives were taken so violently? Before we continue with this chilling story, we will like you to subscribe and tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. It will encourage us to do more and also help the algorithm to suggest our video to more people who like resolved cold cases like this one. Christine Prince was 25 years old in 1982. She was born in Barbados and had made her home in Toronto, Ontario. She carried the vibrant spirit of her island heritage, the warmth of sun-soaked shores, the rhythm of a culture rich in community and resilience. In Toronto, she built a life full of connections. She was known for her kindness, her openness, her ability to make others feel welcomed in a city that could sometimes feel vast and impersonal. She worked with dedication, pursuing her goals with the steady determination that came from knowing where she had come from and where she wanted to go. Her days were filled with the ordinary joys of young adulthood, time with friends, conversations that lasted into the night, dreams of what the future might hold. She loved exploring the city, its neighborhoods, its river areas where water met land in quiet beauty. Her unfulfilled potential was vast. She had the energy to build something lasting, to create relationships that endured, to contribute to the world in ways only she could imagine. She was an individual whose life was her own, shaped by her Barbados roots, enriched by her Toronto experiences, marked by a cultural connection that made her unique. Claire Samson was a young woman in 1983. She lived her days with a quiet grace that drew people to her. She was someone who valued the small moments, the walk through a park, the shared meal with loved ones, the laughter that came from simple pleasures. Her personality was kind and thoughtful, the type that made others feel heard and valued. She pursued her interests with a gentle passion, finding joy in the everyday rhythms of life in Toronto. The city's suburban neighborhoods were her backdrop, the places where she felt at home, where she built routines that grounded her. Her potential stretched ahead of her, years to explore, to love, to create memories that would last. She was her own person, with dreams that were as unique as her spirit,
unlinked to others in ways that made her story distinctly hers. Gracelyn Greenidge was a Toronto resident in 1997. Like Christine, she had been born in Barbados, carrying with her the island's heritage of strength and community. That shared cultural connection, roots in the same soil, echoes of the same traditions, shaped parts of her identity, though she had made Toronto her home. She was known for her resilience, her warmth, her ability to navigate life with a steady heart. Her days were filled with the pursuits that brought her fulfillment, time with those she cared about, moments of reflection by the city's rivers or in its quiet spaces. She dreamed of a future rich with possibility, one where her experiences from Barbados blended with her life in Toronto to create something beautiful. Her individuality shone through, her story her own, her path unconnected to others in ways that highlighted her unique journey. Her unfulfilled potential was a light that should have burned longer, illuminating the lives she touched. All three women, Christine, Claire, and Gracelyn, lived in the Toronto area. They moved through the same city, its neighborhoods, its rivers, its streets. Yet there were no obvious ties between them, no shared friends, no common circles, no reason their paths would cross. They were individuals, each with their own world, their own dreams, their own light. Christine's Barbados heritage connected her culturally to Gracelyn's, but that thread was not visible in 1982 or 1997. It was a quiet echo, one that only hindsight reveals. They were women whose lives were full of promise, promise that should have unfolded in years of joy, of achievement, of love given and received. Their individuality was their strength. Their unfulfilled potential is what makes their loss so profound. They were not defined by what happened to them. They were defined by the lives they lived, warm, resilient, connected to their roots and their adopted home. Respectful archival and family photos of each woman appear on screen, smiling portraits that capture their light, their individuality, the warmth in their eyes. Gentle Toronto neighborhood imagery follows, suburban streets in soft light, blurred city scenes by the river, stock images that evoke the places they knew. These visuals are tender. They are not dramatic. They show three women who were loved, who had lives full of unfulfilled potential. They show the shared Barbados heritage between Christine and Gracelyn as a cultural connection, a quiet thread that tied two lives without them knowing. They show the Toronto area as their common ground, though no obvious ties linked them. They show their individuality, each face distinct, each story her own. On June 1982, Christine Prince became the first known victim.
In June 1982, Christine Prince became the first known victim. She was 25 years old, born in Barbados and living in Toronto. She had built a life in the city, connections with friends, routines that gave her days structure, moments of joy that came from the small things. Her Barbados heritage gave her a cultural warmth that carried through her interactions. She moved through Toronto with the grace of someone who knew how to find light in a new place. That June, she was sexually assaulted and killed. Her body was discovered in the Rouge River area, a place of flowing water and quiet banks, far from the everyday paths she walked. The crime was sudden and violent. It left no immediate trail to follow. It was treated as a standalone homicide. Investigators worked the scene. They interviewed those who knew her. They searched for any detail that might lead to the person responsible.
No clear suspect emerged. The case remained open, but the trail grew cold. In 1983, Claire Samson became the second victim. She was a young woman living her life in Toronto. She had her own routines, her own circle of people, her own quiet dreams for the days ahead. Her story was separate from Christine's. No shared friends, no overlapping paths, no reason at the time to connect them. She was sexually assaulted and killed. The homicide was investigated as its own tragedy. Police collected evidence. They followed leads that surfaced. They spoke with those who knew her. The case stood alone. No link to the previous year's crime was apparent. It too went cold. The years passed. Toronto continued its rhythm. Claire's name remained in the files, but not in the headlines. 14 years later, in 1997, Gracelyn Greenidge became the third victim. She was Barbados-born, like Christine, and had made Toronto her home. Her heritage connected her culturally to Christine in ways that were not visible at the time. No shared social circles, no common workplaces, no obvious ties that would have drawn attention. She lived her days with the same quiet purpose many young women in the city did, building a life, finding joy in small moments, planning for tomorrow. She was sexually assaulted and murdered. The crime was investigated separately. Evidence was gathered. Witnesses were sought. Leads were pursued. Again, no connection to the earlier cases surfaced. The three homicides remained unlinked. They were treated as distinct tragedies. They were shelved as cold cases. The city moved forward. The families waited. The truth stayed hidden. Respectful, non-graphic timeline graphics appear on screen. June 1982 marked with Christine's case, 1983 with Claire's, 1997 with Gracelyn's, each entry standing alone, separated by years, no lines connecting them yet. Aerial maps show the Rouge River area for Christine, suburban Toronto for Claire, and the city landscape for Gracelyn. Distinct places, distinct lives. Blurred stock images of wooded Ontario areas and urban Toronto scenes fade in. Quiet rivers, residential streets, the everyday backdrops where three separate tragedies unfolded. These visuals are gentle. They are not dramatic. They show three women whose lives were lived in the same city but never crossed in ways that linked their fates. They show the distance in time, 15 years between the first and the last. They show the absence of obvious ties, no shared friends, no common events, no reason investigators in those years would have connected them. Police now describe the killings as crimes of opportunity, acts committed by the same offender but without premeditated targeting of these specific women. The crimes were separate in time, separate in place, separate in circumstance. They were treated as unconnected for decades. No pattern was seen, no link was found. The offender moved through the city unnoticed. The families waited. The truth stayed hidden.
When Christine Prince was found in the Rouge River area in June 1982, Toronto Police Service investigators began their work with the tools and methods available at that time. This was the pre-digital era. There were no widespread surveillance cameras in residential or riverfront areas. There were no cell phones to track movements. There were no large-scale DNA databases to compare samples against. Forensic analysis relied on fingerprints, blood typing, witness statements, and physical evidence collected at the scene. Officers interviewed people who knew Christine. They canvassed the Rouge River area. They searched for any trace that might point to who had been with her.
No immediate suspect emerged. No pattern linked her death to anything else. The case was treated as a standalone homicide. It was investigated thoroughly within the limits of 1982 technology and resources. But the trail grew quiet. It was set aside as a cold case, still open, still waiting. 1 year later, in 1983, Claire Samson's homicide was investigated separately. Toronto police worked the scene. They collected evidence. They interviewed those in her circle. They looked for connections to known offenders in the city. Again, no suspect matched the evidence. No link to Christine Prince's case was apparent. The two deaths remained in separate files. No shared offender was suspected. The investigations proceeded independently. They followed leads that surfaced. They revisited when new information arrived. They waited for the kind of breakthrough that 1983 could not provide. The cases stayed open. They stayed separate. 14 years passed. In 1997, Gracelyn Greenidge was killed. Toronto police investigated her homicide as its own case. Evidence was gathered. Witnesses were sought. Leads were pursued. No connection to the earlier deaths of Christine Prince or Claire Samson was seen. No common suspect surfaced. The three homicides remained unlinked. They were treated as distinct crimes, each tragic in its own right, each investigated within the resources of its time. No pattern was recognized. No offender was tied to more than one. The files remained separate. The Toronto Police Service and, where applicable, the Ontario Provincial Police continued their efforts across the decades. They reviewed cases periodically. They followed new tips when they came. They kept the evidence secure. They waited for advances that might one day bridge what had seemed unbridgeable. The challenges were rooted in the era and the nature of the crimes. Pre-digital limitations meant no automatic cross-referencing of evidence across years. No centralized genetic databases existed to flag matches. Cases were handled in silos, each homicide assigned to its own team, its own timeline. The crimes occurred in different years. The victims had no obvious ties. The offender left no signature that investigators of the time could recognize as a pattern. No witnesses, no overlapping locations, no reason to suspect one person responsible across 15 years. Visual timelines appear on screen. 3 separate lines: June 1982 for Christine Prince, 1983 for Claire Samson, 1997 for Gracelyn Greenidge, each line standing alone, no bridges connecting them. Old news clippings fade in, headlines from the 1980s and 1990s reporting each death individually, no mention of the others. Respectful stock imagery of police work appears, officers at scenes, evidence collection, file reviews, non-graphic, focused on the dedication rather than the horror. These visuals are steady. They show the complexity of investigations that spanned eras. They show the separation that kept the truth hidden. How does one killer commit crimes across 15 years without being caught? That question was not asked for decades. There was no reason to ask it. The cases appeared unrelated. The offender moved through the city unnoticed. He was incarcerated for violent crimes from 1983 to 1999, yet the murders occurred before, during, and after that period. No linkage was made. No pattern was seen. The investigations proceeded in parallel. They waited. They waited for the day when science could do what human effort alone could not. In 2019, a new partnership with Othram Lab changed everything.
In December 2025, the Center of Forensic Sciences reached a conclusion that had eluded investigators for more than 4 decades. On December 3, 2025, they conclusively identified Kenneth Smith as the offender responsible for all 3 homicides through DNA matching across the cases. The process began with a DNA profile developed from one of the investigations, most likely the Gracelyn Greenidge case, where the partnership with Othram had been central. That profile did not match any known individuals in existing databases, but when compared to the DNA from the other 2 cases, Christine Prince in 1982 and Claire Samson in 1983, it matched perfectly. The same genetic signature appeared in all 3. The Center of Forensic Sciences confirmed the link beyond any doubt. Advanced genetic genealogy followed. Investigators built a family tree from the shared DNA profile. They traced genetic connections through public databases, following branches backward and sideways through generations. The tree narrowed. It converged on a name, Kenneth Smith. Traditional DNA testing was then applied directly to reference samples associated with Smith. The match was complete. The evidence established his involvement in all 3 homicides beyond reasonable doubt. On December 11, 2025, the Toronto Police Service and the Ontario Provincial Police held a joint announcement. Officials stood at the podium. They stated that Kenneth Smith was responsible for the murders of Christine Prince, Claire Samson, and Gracelyn Greenidge. They noted that Smith had died in 2019. If he had still been alive, Toronto police would have arrested him for the Prince and Greenidge cases, while the Ontario Provincial Police would have handled the Samson homicide. The announcement was calm and factual. It was final. After 43 years in the case of Christine Prince, 42 years in the case of Claire Samson, and 28 years in the case of Gracelyn Greenidge, the killer had a name: Kenneth Smith. Non-graphic laboratory imagery appears on screen. Controlled environments where samples are handled under precise lighting, screens displaying genetic profiles, quiet equipment working in the background. A timeline stretches gently from 1982 to 2025. 1982 marked with Christine Prince, 1983 with Claire Samson, 1997 with Gracelyn Greenidge, and 2025 marked with the Center of Forensic Sciences identification and the December 11th announcement. Excerpts from the press conference fade in, officials speaking with measured authority, stating the DNA matches, the genetic genealogy process, the confirmation of Smith's involvement. These visuals are clinical and calm. They are not dramatic. They show the quiet power of science doing what human effort alone could not, reaching across 15 years of unlinked crimes to name the truth. Kenneth Smith had been incarcerated for violent crimes from 1983 to 1999. The murders occurred before that period, during it, and after it. Police described the killings as crimes of opportunity, acts committed without long-term planning or specific victim selection that would have created visible patterns at the time. No obvious links between the women had been apparent. No shared social circles, no common locations, no reason investigators in those years would have connected the cases. The offender moved through the city unnoticed. He evaded detection for 15 years of active offending, and then another 20 years after his incarceration ended. The breakthrough was the result of deliberate choices. Toronto police chose to submit degraded DNA to modern sequencing. The Center of Forensic Sciences chose to apply the latest matching techniques. Genetic genealogists built the family tree.
investigators chose to confirm the match with traditional DNA testing. Every step was careful. Every step was documented. Every step honored the evidence that had waited so long to speak. The result was clarity where there had been only separation. The result was a name where there had been only absence. The result was a connection where there had been only 3 isolated tragedies. For the families of Christine Prince, Claire Samson, and Gracelyn Greenidge, this brought long-awaited closure. It was not the closure that returns a loved one. It was not the closure that erases the pain of 1982, 1983, or 1997, but it was closure nonetheless. It was truth where there had been doubt. It was certainty where there had been questions. It was the ability to speak of their daughters and sisters without the constant uncertainty of who ended their lives. It was the ability to remember them as they were, individuals with their own warmth, their own dreams, their own light, without the shadow of an unknown killer hanging over every memory. It was the ability to honor them with the knowledge that the person responsible had been named. This moment also carried meaning beyond the 3 families. It showed that genetic genealogy could link crimes previously seen as unconnected. It showed that DNA matching could bridge decades. It showed that cold cases are not abandoned. They are carried forward until science and persistence meet. It showed that justice, though delayed by years or decades, is not always denied. For the families, this brought long-awaited closure. And for every family still waiting, it is a reminder that truth can wait, but it does not always stay hidden forever.
When the Toronto Police Service and the Ontario Provincial Police stood together on December 11, 2025, the families of Christine Prince, Claire Samson, and Gracelyn Greenidge were present in spirit and in heart. They had waited, Christine's loved ones for 43 years, Claire's for 42, Gracelyn's for 28. They had lived with silence that stretched across birthdays, anniversaries, ordinary days that felt anything but ordinary. They had carried questions that had no answers, memories that were shadowed by the unknown. Then, in that moment, they heard the name, Kenneth Smith. They heard that DNA from each case matched the same man. They heard that genetic genealogy had built the family tree that led to him. They heard that he had died in 2019. They heard that no prosecution would follow. Relief came first. It was not the relief that undoes loss. It was the relief that replaces endless wondering with final knowledge. After decades of separate grief, they learned their loved ones had been taken by the same person. The isolation of each tragedy was lifted. The families were no longer alone in their sorrow. They were connected by truth. Gratitude followed. They thanked the Toronto Police Service for never closing the files. They thanked the Ontario Provincial Police for their part in the Samson investigation. They thanked the Centre of Forensic Sciences for the DNA matching that crossed the cases. They thanked Othram for the genetic genealogy that traced the family tree and found Kenneth Smith. Their gratitude was not formal, it was deep. It was heartfelt. It was the acknowledgement that truth, once found, belongs to those who never stopped believing it could be found. They expressed thanks for the science that spoke when human effort alone could not. They expressed thanks for the investigators who chose to re-examine evidence that had waited so long. They expressed thanks for the collaboration that linked what had seemed unlinked. They acknowledged that no prosecution would be possible. Smith had died in 2019. There would be no trial. There would be no courtroom moment of accountability.
That absence was part of the closure they received. It was imperfect, it was incomplete, but it was real. They could now speak of Christine, Claire, and Gracelyn without the constant uncertainty of who had ended their lives. They could remember them as they were, individuals with their own light, their own dreams, their own place in the world, without the shadow of an unknown killer hanging over every memory. They could honor their loved ones with the knowledge that the person responsible had been named. The broader context of this resolution carries its own weight. Kenneth Smith was a serial offender, missed for decades due to the lack of linkage between the cases. The crimes were described as crimes of opportunity, acts committed without long-term planning or specific victim selection that would have created visible patterns at the time. Police noted the possibility of additional victims. The announcement served as a reminder that serial offenders can move through communities unnoticed when cases are not connected. It highlighted the importance of modern forensic tools in revealing what earlier generations could not see. It showed that separate tragedies can share a single source. It showed that time does not always hide the truth forever. Respectful family photos appear on screen, images of Christine, Claire, and Gracelyn in moments of ordinary happiness, smiling portraits that capture their individuality, their warmth, the lives they lived before everything changed. Subtle memorial elements fade in, candles lit in quiet remembrance, flowers placed with care, handwritten notes that speak of love that outlasts even the longest wait. Press conference imagery follows, officials speaking with calm authority, family members listening, the weight of the moment visible in their faces. These visuals are tender, they are not dramatic. They honor 3 women whose lives were taken years apart. They honor families who carried those lives through unimaginable sorrow. They celebrate the justice that arrived, late but real. For the families, this brought long-awaited closure. It was not the closure that returns a daughter, a sister, a loved one. It was not the closure that erases the pain of 1982, 1983, or 1997, but it was closure nevertheless. It was truth where there had been doubt. It was certainty where there had been questions. It was the ability to speak of their loved ones without the constant uncertainty of who had ended their lives. It was the ability to remember them as they were, individuals with their own light, their own dreams, their own place in the world, without the shadow of an unknown killer hanging over every memory. It was the ability to honor them with the knowledge that the person responsible had been named. This case leaves us with powerful lessons.
This resolution of the murders of Christine Prince, Claire Samson, and Gracelyn Greenidge carries lessons that reach far beyond Toronto and far beyond these 3 families. It demonstrates the power of genetic genealogy to link crimes that had been seen as entirely separate. For more than 4 decades in Christine's case, 42 years in Claire's, and 28 years in Gracelyn's, investigators had no reason to connect them. No shared witnesses, no overlapping locations, no visible pattern that would have drawn attention across 15 years. The crimes were described as crimes of opportunity, acts committed without long-term planning or specific victim selection that would have created obvious ties at the time. Yet genetic genealogy built a family tree from a single DNA profile. It traced connections through distant relatives. It converged on Kenneth Smith. It showed that one offender could be responsible for homicides before, during, and after a 16-year period of incarceration for violent crimes.
The science did not invent links, it revealed them. It bridged what human effort alone could not see. This breakthrough is part of what many now call the DNA revolution in Canadian cold cases. In the 1980s and 1990s, cases were investigated with the tools of their time: fingerprints, witness statements, physical trace evidence. DNA linkage across unrelated files was not possible. Databases were small. Genetic genealogy did not exist. But evidence was preserved. Samples from each case were kept secure. They waited. When forensic-grade genome sequencing became available, when laboratories like Othram could extract usable profiles from degraded material, when databases expanded to allow family tree construction, those samples were given new life. The Center of Forensic Sciences matched DNA across the 3 cases. They confirmed the links. They identified the offender. The revolution is not just in technology. It is in the choice to re-examine what had been set aside. It is in the decision to collaborate across agencies and borders. It is in the refusal to let time declare a case finished. The importance of evidence preservation cannot be overstated. In 1982, when Christine Prince was killed, investigators collected and stored biological material. In 1983, the same was done for Claire Samson. In 1997, the same for Gracelyn Greenidge. Those decisions, made in moments when closure seemed distant, made December 2025 possible. Evidence is not just material, it is memory, it is possibility. When it is kept safe, when it is respected, it can wait for the moment when it can speak. It can wait for the day when science can do what human effort alone could not. It can wait for the day when truth arrives. The 3 women, Christine Prince, Claire Samson, and Gracelyn Greenidge, were from Toronto. Christine and Gracelyn shared Barbados heritage, a cultural connection that was not visible in the original investigations. They had no obvious ties between them, no shared friends, no common events, no reason their paths would cross in life. Yet their deaths were linked by one offender. Their lives were cut short by crimes of opportunity. They were individuals with their own warmth, their own dreams, their own place in the world. Christine was 25, building her life in Toronto after coming from Barbados. Claire was a young woman navigating her own path in the city. Gracelyn was also Barbados-born, making Toronto her home, carrying her heritage into her days. They were women whose futures were taken. Their potential was vast. Their loss was profound. They are remembered not by what happened to them, but by who they were, loved, valued, irreplaceable. If this story has stayed with you, if the endurance of these families, the quiet power of genetic genealogy, the possibility of linking what seemed unlinked, or the hope that truth can still arrive after decades has touched something in you, please consider taking one small step. If you have information on these cases or any other unsolved crimes, contact the Toronto Police Service, the Ontario Provincial Police, or Crime Stoppers. Your detail might be the one that fits. Your voice might be the one that brings peace to a family still waiting. If you value thoughtful true crime narration, real cold case breakthroughs told with care for the victims and their families, and stories of justice and hope, please subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next case, the next update, the next moment when answers arrive. Like this video if it brought something meaningful to you. Share it respectfully to help spread awareness and honor Christine, Claire, and Gracelyn. In the comments below, feel free to share your thoughts, always with kindness and consideration for the families who carry these stories. Which cold case would you like us to cover next? Your suggestions help guide what we bring to you. Sources for this episode include the Toronto Police Service official update from December 11, 2025, the DNA Solves article on Gracelyn Greenidge, CBC News coverage of the announcement, Global News and CP24 reports on Kenneth Smith's identification, and the Toronto Star's detailed profiles of the victims and police statements. Full links are in the description below. We will keep telling these stories, not to sensationalize, but to remember, to honor, to bear witness to both the loss and the long, steady road towards justice. Justice delayed, but never forgotten.